I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the Ponzi scheme murder trial. Natalie Cochran was running a Ponzi scheme, ripping off friends and family, and prosecutors say it was that scam that led to the murder of her husband. Here's the story.
Natalie Cochran was married to her husband, Michael. Together, they had 2 children. She was a pharmacist who was running a business. Life in West Virginia was good, as Natalie was making a lot of money with the business she was running. The only problem was it wasn't a legitimate business. It was a Ponzi scheme, and she was defrauding friends and family, including her in-laws. Prosecutors say Natalie was afraid her husband would find out and would get angry that his parents had lost so much money. She was also afraid he would get her in trouble. So, prosecutors say she murdered him with insulin. Natalie denies the charges and denies injecting Michael with insulin and claims he was in poor health because of all the substances he was taking as a bodybuilder. Now a jury must decide what happened.
Through the years, we have and I have covered many cases of spousal murders. And you know and I know that prosecutors do not have to prove motive. It's not an element of the crime. The only time you have to prove it is in a hate crime, because that's what the hate crime is about, why you did it. But why you murder someone in a regular murder case, it's not an element that prosecutors need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. But having watched all these cases for all these years, I am a firm believer that prosecutors should prove the motive, because jurors want to know why a wife or a husband would murder their spouse, and if they have children, would take away one of their parents. They want to know. They want to know. Well, in this case, prosecutors have a very clear theory on why they believe Natalie Cochran murdered Michael, her husband. Take a listen.
Why? Why would this happen? And why would it happen when it happened? Well, as the defense counsel informed you during questioning, the defendant had run a Ponzi scheme, a big one, where millions of dollars were taken from friends, relatives, local professionals. As many deceptions and lies as were told to her victims of the Ponzi scheme, Michael Cochran was told just as many. He did not know what was going on, but he was determined to find out. They've got hundreds of millions of dollars in their money stuck in a bank in Virginia, Bank of America. That's what she told Michael Cochran. That's what he believed. So Michael Cochran is going to straighten this out. They charter a flight from Beckley to the Bank of America branch in Lynchburg, Virginia for the 6th of February, 2019. It would have been over February 6th. But of course, the Cochrans never made it from Beckley to Lynchburg. And Michael Cochran is dead because of this.
So it's clear what prosecutors believe here is that Michael was going to find out about this, that Natalie was running this Ponzi scheme, and it was just going to all blow up in Natalie's face. And all of this brings us to the first question in our investigation. This is an important one for the prosecution and the defense in this case. Did Michael know about the Ponzi scheme? I mean, his wife is the one running it, according to prosecutors here. Did Michael know about it? Is it possible that he didn't know about it? All this money flowing. Joining me tonight to help us through all this from West Virginia, Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft, and also joining us by phone, an attorney specializing in wrongful death cases, former criminal defense attorney who's familiar with the courts in that area of West Virginia. John Mize is with us as well. Thank you, John and Kelly. Kelly, let me begin with you. A little bit more background here. What was this business supposed to be about, and what what have we heard about how it was being run?
Well, Vinnie, a lot. We have heard a lot about this Ponzi scheme. So Natalie Cochran and her husband, what we heard on the stand during this trial is that Natalie was the majority owner of the business because her husband had told her that if we were a woman-owned business, majority woman-owned business, we would be able to get more government contracts. So she was 51% owner, him 49% owner. And so they were telling people that they were getting these government contracts. When we heard the son testify during this trial, he talked about lying between his mother and father while his father was on the computer looking for government contracts. And one came up as $50,000 for one of these government contracts, and he really wanted to bid on it. And so that's what they were doing. Natalie, supposedly, what we've heard throughout this trial, was kind of in charge of the money. Her sister testified that she is the one that dealt with her sister on the money. She testified that she invested about $50,000 with her sister as well as Michael. And so that's what they were doing. They were getting people to invest with them. They were bidding on these government contracts, and then obviously the whole thing ended up blowing up.
Let's take a listen, because you mentioned their son. Let's take a listen to what he said on the stand.
I don't remember exactly when he got laid off from the workforce, but I know they started their business around that time.
They being your mom and your dad?
Yes, sir.
And what business was that?
Their contracting business.
They contracted with whom?
Federal government.
And you remember that?
Yes.
All right. Who was working on the contracts?
My dad. My dad was on his computer, and he was going through contracts, and you could just see thousands of dollars on the contracts. And I asked him what they were, and that was the day that he found a 50 cal contract that I helped him with. And yeah, it just kept going from there. He just never got off. We were in the hunting stand, and he was still on his computer working on it. I think we all know who wore the pants in the situation. He definitely ran it way more than she did.
All right, John Mize is joining us by phone. John, what are your thoughts here? If you've got the testimony of the son now, he's part of the business. Is it plausible to think that he had no idea this thing was a Ponzi scheme?
Well, I think it's implausible to think that he had no idea. I mean, you have to really look at this entire question through the lens of the jury. In Raleigh County, West Virginia, our average income per individual is $26,600 a year. The average household income is a little over $47,000 a year. So people in this area, blue-collar workers, individuals on fixed income, they know where every dollar enters their home and where it's being spent. And so here we've been presented with evidence or testimony that Michael Cochran was the beneficiary of this lavish lifestyle. This money is coming from somewhere to fund these purchases of vehicles, vacations, homes. And certainly he knew about the investors. There's no doubt about that. These investors were not nameless. They were not faceless investors. They were his own friends and family. So the question becomes, did Michael think he was spending investor income, or did he think that he was spending income that was derived from the business, that it was a legitimate business rather than a Ponzi scheme? There's problems there when you start to ask those questions, and we haven't been given enough information from any witness to answer those questions. If there's this influx of capital from investors, we've heard testimony, there's been over $1 million worth of investments. If Michael believes that it's a legitimate business and they are selling contracts to the government, certainly they've got to sell a product. Guns in this case. You know, the allegation is they're providing weapons to the government. So where are the weapons? I mean, certainly Michael knows whether they have purchased, whether they stockpile weapons, and whether those weapons have been received and whether they've been moved to the government. So there's a lot of questions that comes into play as to, he knew there was money there. Where did he think the money was coming from? And now that the prosecutor has made this promise to the jury that we're going to prove this was the motive, that he was unaware, then you have to ask those questions. The other thing is, if the theory is that Michael was going to fly to Lynchburg to ask the bank, where's this money? Why do we not have access to this money? Well, then who tipped Michael off that there's no money? Presumably the investors. The investors are getting upset that they haven't been getting any payback. So we've had many of these investors on the stand. Why haven't we asked these investors? Were you complaining to Michael? What did you say to Michael about your investment? Were you inquiring of Michael when they would get paid back for their investment? We haven't been given that testimony. So what we have here, it looks to me as though Michael was receiving benefit from this money. He had to know where it was coming from, and he had to know that they weren't making good on contracts, at least at the point in time that he passed away, because there was no product that was being sold. If you're not selling a product, why do you need the capital from the investors?
Great points. All right, Kelly Craft, John Mize are going to stay with us. Coming up next, why didn't Natalie call 911 earlier?
Did she call 911? No. Did she load him into a car and take him to the yard? No.
How are we doing, guys? We're good? Okay.
You're on very shaky ground.
That is unreal.
People wanted answers, and people started locking their doors.
I did not do it to hurt anybody.
You know what it means. You know what you did, right?
Please hear me out. Please. This was a real-life soap opera.
I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
About noonish, one way or the other, Michael Cochran collapses in the Cochran house kitchen. Now, the defendant gives various versions of what she saw, what she heard, and what she did, but there's no question that he was unconscious by about 12:20 or so. How do we know that? She took a picture of him and sent that picture to a number of people, showing him in a collapsed state in their kitchen. Did she call 911? No. Did she load him into a car and take him to the yard? No.
The events and the way this all transpired, which resulted in the death of Michael Cochran, a little unusual, to say the least, right? For a married couple with children, and what's going on here, and how he didn't necessarily get help early on. Let's take a listen to more of the opening statement from the prosecution, sort of outlining the events of that day and how Michael was presenting himself and what the reaction was of the defendant, his wife.
She called two construction guys that worked for her. They took Michael Cochran from the kitchen floor and put him on the couch, where he would remain for the rest of the day, some at least 6 hours or so. Stephanie Hamilton came to the house. She looks at Michael Cochran, and she tells her he needs to be checked. Did the defendant do that? No. Let him lay on the couch. Roughly 3 hours later, things have deteriorated to the point where Michael loses control of his bladder and urinates on himself. Did that event trigger any action by the defendant? Did it seek medical care for her husband, who's on the couch and unconscious now for a number of hours? No. She and her sister changed his clothes and left him on the couch. By 6-ish or so that evening, Michael's best friend, Chris Davis, comes to the house. Chris Davis takes charge. Chris Davis says, we're taking him to the hospital. They do. They go to Raleigh General Hospital. But the damage has been done.
This is bizarre. From my perspective, this is the part of the case that I'm trying to understand. if she's innocent. Like, how is this happening in your house? Which brings us to the next question in our investigation. It's about that day. Why didn't Natalie call 911 earlier? They're carrying him from the kitchen. She's got to hire guys or bring her construction guys in. Yeah, put him on the couch over here. He's non-responsive? Like, what is going on in this house? Still with us, Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft and West Virginia attorney John Mize. Great to have you both here. I want to do this. I want to play Penny Lowry, who is the defendant's sister, who was there that day, what she said about everyone's reaction to Michael being on the couch, unresponsive.
Were you, at least you, aware of the fact that Michael Cochran didn't want to go to the hospital?
Oh, yeah.
He expressed that view exactly to you? He expressed
everybody, yes, to all of his.
And Natalie was present when he said that.
Yes.
Okay, so Kelly, paint the picture for me. What is the state of Michael Cochran? Is he conscious? Is he not conscious? Is he able to communicate? Is he not communicating? Why can't he get up off the kitchen floor and get himself to the couch? Why is he going to the bathroom on himself?
A few things. Not communicating, Vinny. Also unconscious. But then when Penny was on the stand, the defendant's sister, she talked about the fact that she heard him snoring. And so this big question, why didn't the defendant call 911? There have been witness testimony after witness testimony, people corroborating this idea, this theory that Michael Cochran did not like hospitals. In fact, he hated them. The daughter testified about that, saying, my dad hated the hospital. Also, there was testimony that there was a similar incident many months ago, prior to when he ended up passing away, prior to when he was lying on the couch unconscious, and people said they thought maybe this was just a repeat of what happened then, and then he ended up waking up. Unfortunately, this time, he did not wake up.
Well, my guess is that Michael prefers the hospital over the morgue, by the way. But you mentioned that the daughter testified. Let's take a listen to that testimony. Important stuff.
I'm not entirely sure when he had back surgery, but I remember him having it.
Okay. How long did he stay in the hospital for that? Or was it an outpatient?
For the back surgery, I'm not sure.
Okay. Did he like to go to hospitals?
No, he hated them.
What did he tell you about these hospitals?
He considered them to be a waste of his time and that he never wanted to be in one again.
So, and there you saw the defendant, Natalie Cochran, as her daughter is testifying in her case, right, called as a witness for her. Take a look at her reaction when her daughter finishes her testimony and gets off of the stand. You can see she throws her a little heart there and a smile. And there you go. John Mize, let me ask you, to me, this is the Achilles heel for Natalie Cochran's case. The man is unconscious. He's going to the bathroom on himself. He can't get himself from the kitchen to the couch, and she's not getting him any help.
Right, I think you're right. I think this is, in fact, the golden question in the case so far. And again, let's look at this from a regional perspective. Many of the folks in a rural community are somewhat skeptical of going to the doctor. A lot of people don't want to go to the doctor every time they feel ill. But even those folks will go to the doctor when they feel that they have a sickness or an illness that is serious. And so here we've got Natalie Cochran and her defense giving us the idea that Michael would not want to go to the hospital, and that she believes that this episode on this date was similar to prior episodes that he had had months before. But the problem with that idea is that several of the witnesses, particularly the witnesses today, indicated that Michael had been getting much worse in the days leading up to his death. And so it's not plausible for the defendant to say that I thought that this was the same as before. The other thing I would like for each of the witnesses to have been asked is, if these witnesses are testifying that Michael did not like the hospital, did not want to go to the hospital, go ahead and ask them what would be the outcome if Natalie did take him to the hospital and he woke up in the hospital. What would have been the repercussion? It's one thing to say he doesn't like it, but how bad would it really have been
Exactly.
for her if she had made the call to do it?
And the other thing, John, it's important here. You're making the argument that he doesn't like hospitals. Well, he's unconscious. It's not about whether he likes it or doesn't like it. It's about what a loving spouse does for, their husband when he's in distress. And she's not a doctor. My goodness, that's the part that's so problematic. Kelly, with the children testifying today, any indication of how the jury is receiving the children who clearly seem to be supporting mom?
Yes, I noticed this especially with the son on the stand. He came across just very genuine and sweet and kind, and he talked about how he did many things with his father. He talked about their lives together, life with his mother as well. And you could tell when he was testifying, I was looking at the jurors, a lot of them would smile at a lot of his testimony. You could tell he would get choked up at times, and jurors themselves were getting a little choked up with some of his testimony. And some of the aftermath of his testimony, the judge had left the bench, and then he came back into the courtroom, and there was a long embrace between him and his mother. I also want to say there has been some testimony that he, the victim in this case, Michael Cochran, was agitated, that he kind of had a short fuse. There's been testimony that he was taking steroids. So to that question, what would have happened if Natalie would have taken him to the hospital? What would be the aftermath? It's very possible that she could possibly say on the witness stand when she does testify that she knew he was going to become irate with her like he had in the past. I'm not saying that's what she's going to testify to,
right,
but that could be a possibility.
Absolutely. Okay. Guests are staying with us. Coming up next, was Michael in good health? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the Ponzi scheme murder trial. Natalie Cochran is a wife and mother charged with killing her husband because of a Ponzi scheme she was running. Here's the story.
It's the trial everyone is talking about. Natalie Cochran ran a Ponzi scheme, defrauding her friends and her family, including her husband's parents. But prosecutors say when her husband found out, she was afraid he would get her in trouble. So she murdered him with insulin. Natalie denies all the allegations and believes Michael died because of all the substances he was taking as a bodybuilder. Now, it's up to a jury to figure out what happened to Michael Cochran.
Cause of death is obviously always an issue in a murder case. You've got to prove it. You've got to prove, the defendant's responsible, but, exactly how did the defendant do it? And what was the state of the victim? And in this case, right out of the box, this is a huge issue that both sides see completely differently. Let's begin with the prosecutor here describing Michael's health in the beginning of the trial. Again, trying to establish to this jury who this victim was, what he was up to, and who he was before they say he was murdered by Natalie.
On February the 5th of 2019, Michael Cochran was a 200-pound, healthy 38-year-old man. By midday of February 6th of 2019, he had lost consciousness, and he would never regain consciousness. He died in hospice care 5 days later, February 11th of 2019. How could this happen?
How did it happen? And that's obviously the big question for the jury. But the next question in our investigation gets to the heart of all of this. And it's about the victim, Michael Cochran. Was Michael in good health? Prosecutors say he was in good health until Natalie basically poisoned him with the insulin. Somehow injected him with insulin in such an amount that he went from healthy on the 5th to a few days later in hospice care. So, was he in good health? Joining me to help figure this all out, author, retired medical examiner, and forensic pathologist, Dr. Michelle Dupree, and a man who's coached bodybuilders for 20 plus years and who's trained for more than 40 years. He co-hosts the Blood, Sweat, and Gear podcast. Skip Hill is with us. And again, this is significant because Michael I don't think he was a professional out on the stage doing it, but he was a guy who lifted and saw himself as a bodybuilder. I want to play this for you, Dr. Dupree. This is some of Michael's his children, his friends, talking about Michael's health.
In about 2017, did you start noticing changes in your father's health?
Yes.
What did you notice?
He was very agitated and angry, more so than not. And he was having a lot of headaches. And he would complain about them frequently, and he wasn't eating as much as he used to.
I know that there was a time he got really sick, and we thought it might be mold because he'd worked under the house. They have an older house, and he'd worked in some old houses, and he would tell me that he was just dizzy and felt foggy all the time, or that he just couldn't think. And then the same way I observed him during, when he passed away, he had done that before, and I had seen him in the hospital. He would throw up, and what I thought, I would just be speculating, but I thought looked more like seizure activity.
He wasn't himself. He didn't act the same.
Did he have was he ever confused?
There was an instance where he seemed very confused. He got sick, and I feel like around that time is when you could just notice that he started to change a little bit.
How did he start to change, sir?
Just forgetting stuff all the time. And he was more aggressive for sure.
The day before your father collapsed, how did he feel? Do you recall that day?
He was still feeling all the symptoms, the irritability, the headaches, the dizziness, the lack of appetite. But at that point, it just kind of seemed like a normal thing.
All right, Dr. Dupree, I'm going to list, I was writing them down, all these symptoms: aggressive, irritability, agitated, headaches, not eating, dizzy, foggy, not himself, started to forget things, sort of a seizure type of actions, throwing up. What is this? Does this sound like a guy who's healthy?
Well, no, not really. But I think you have to try and narrow down the cause of that, because it could be mental strain or stress, and not something that's physical, not something that may actually be harmful enough to kill him. Without knowing his medical record or seeing the autopsy report, it's kind of hard to determine. But no, he doesn't sound very healthy at that point.
All right, Skip, I want you to take a listen to this, because we've got testimony about some of the supplements and things that Michael was allegedly taking.
I know that he took steroids, and he took many other supplements, but I don't know the names of the supplements.
Well, tell us how he did that daily. Did he do it daily?
Yes, every morning.
Every morning. How did he do that?
He would lay all of his pills out on the counter, and there would be so many of them that they would just sit in a whole circle, and it looked like the size of a dinner plate. And then he would scoop them handfuls at a time into his mouth and use the sink water to drain them down. And then he would take the steroids as well.
How many pills were there, just roughly?
Probably around 40 a day.
And you don't know what they were?
No, I remember a lot of them he got from GNC in the mall.
Okay. Where else did he get them from? Do you know?
He said that he ordered his steroids from Mexico.
He'd take his supplements, which was 30 pills a day every morning, and then his anabolics, which are steroids.
Did he also inject anything?
I only saw that one time, and they were at the beach with us. And I came out of my bedroom, and he was in the kitchen. And I can remember the kids they were young enough, they slept together on the sofa bed. And I was sitting on their bed, and he was in the kitchen. I saw him do an injection.
Okay, Skip, what are your thoughts here? Steroids, some maybe from Mexico, GNC, 30 to 40 pills every single day. What's going on here?
Well, if I had to guess, the vast majority of those orals probably weren't steroids. And it's speculation, of course, from my perspective right now. I don't have all that information, but it's quite common in the bodybuilding world to ingest a lot of oral supplements. As the lady noted, there are no steroids sold at GNC. So anything he would have bought at GNC, of course, is just kind of an over-the-counter type supplement.
Does it sound like it's a huge amount, like way over the top, 30 to 40 every day, that could be causing all of these symptoms that he's having?
Well, it depends on what those supplements are, obviously. If they were all oral steroids, there probably would be some problems with 30 or 40 of them a day. If they're over-the-counter supplements, it's hard telling because there's so many different things that he could be taking. A lot of people in our industry will what we call kitchen sink it. And that's where, well, this supplement has this benefit, this supplement has this benefit, and there's a laundry list of things that are taken, and it becomes overkill at some point. So, it'd be speculation on my part to guess, number one, what he was taking, and number two, if it would have any type of the impact that it was having on him, from seizures to loss of memory, things of that nature. Quite frankly, I've not seen most of those symptoms, in my experience, caused from steroids either.
Interesting. Let me ask you about one other thing, because it's a big part of this case. Insulin. I'm a diabetic. I've been taking insulin for decades. But are bodybuilders now using insulin to build muscle?
They are. It's become more common practice last 10 years or so, 10, 12, 15 years. It's becoming more common. It's a storage hormone. It's not a hormone that directly builds muscle tissue or contributes directly to hypertrophy, but it's a storage hormone. We're going to store those nutrients either as body fat or muscle. So we want to try to kind of shift that or maneuver that or manipulate that so that we can feed the muscle, recovery improves, things of that nature, and indirectly you can get bigger from it, yes.
Well, Skip, as you said, just by taking it doesn't make you bigger, because if it did, I'd be huge, and I'm not.
Right, exactly.
Because I've been taken as a diabetic. Skip Hill, appreciate your insight. We may have to call on you again on this case. Dr. Michelle Dupree is going to stay with us. When we come back, did insulin kill Michael?
The only reasonable conclusion that I could make is that he was given insulin.
Grieving widow or mastermind behind a murder.
Monica Cementelli is accused of plotting to kill her husband.
Famed celebrity hairstylist Fabio Cementelli.
Prosecutors say she and her lover killed Fabio to collect a big life insurance policy.
The defense may say she's a bad woman, but she wouldn't be involved in a murder.
It's a whodunit Hollywood story, but will there be a twist that no one sees?
The celebrity stylist murder trial. Coverage begins following jury selection on Court TV.
everything. Consider the fact that this cold-blooded killer borrows a murder weapon from a neighbor to kill her husband with the insulin that involves now a couple of witnesses. Then she places that medicine in her refrigerator, the evidence of the crime apparently according to the state, for 4 months. And then she somehow does not use any other substances that she knows of because she is a pharmacist. That theory is absurd, ladies and gentlemen. This is a smokescreen that the state is going to present to you. You will hear expert testimony and evidence that this type of insulin could not kill anybody.
This is a case where prosecutors are alleging death by insulin. There you hear the defense saying this amount of insulin or this type of insulin is not going to get it done anyway. And it's absurd. The whole thing's absurd. Let me play this for you now. Trooper Bledsoe is someone who interviewed the defendant more than once. First 2 times he interviewed Natalie Cochran, no mention of insulin. Take a listen to how he describes his 3rd interview with the man who is dead with his wife, Natalie.
She indicated that, again, they had gone separate ways that morning and had returned home, and that upon returning home, Mr. Cochran had been sleeping on the couch for approximately 45 minutes to an hour, and that when he awoke shortly after that, he went into the kitchen and had collapsed. And also she introduced that in that interview that Michael Cochran was allegedly using insulin as part of a bodybuilding regimen.
Okay. So, okay, now he's taking the insulin. She's saying it, apparently. That brings us to our next question. Really important for this jury. Did insulin kill Michael? And then the follow-up is, well, how did the insulin get in Michael if it was the insulin that killed him? But we've heard a lot from the defense about how bad a shape he was in, health-wise, that he just wasn't healthy. Joining me live from West Virginia, Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft, and still with us, retired medical examiner Dr. Michelle Dupree. Let me ask you, Kelly, where is the defense on this? Have they conceded that, yes, he took insulin, and have they conceded that she knew he was taking insulin?
No, not necessarily, Vinny. So they have said there is no direct evidence that Michael died from insulin. There's no direct evidence that Natalie Cochran used insulin to kill him. They have made that abundantly clear. What we're going to hear from Natalie when she takes the stand, we would assume that she is going to talk about what she said in that 3rd interview with investigator Bledsoe, that he was taking insulin himself, that he was injecting insulin. So we anticipate hearing that. We also know that when the forensic pathologist took the stand and he testified about his autopsy of the body that was conducted many, many years later, that he said there's no other viable explanation as to why Michael's blood sugar was so low. So we believe, I believe, that he was injected with insulin. Also, we heard that from the endocrinologist on the stand as well, talking about his low blood sugar and no other viable option.
Okay. Dr. Dupree, I want to play for you Dr. Paul Shane Uribe talking about the cause and manner of death.
With the entirety of the circumstances, including the initial autopsy findings, the second autopsy findings, which there weren't much, the history of profound hypoglycemia that's very much unexplained, I came to the conclusion that the cause of death was exogenous insulin administration, and there's no explanation for why a non-diabetic, otherwise relatively healthy male would have such profound hypoglycemia and also refractory hypoglycemia as well. And there's no other viable explanation for it. That the only reasonable conclusion that I could make is that he was given insulin.
And so specifically, what is his manner of death?
Manner of death would be homicide, because there's no evidence that he administered insulin himself. People don't accidentally administer insulin to themselves or given.
We object at this time.
Okay, Dr. Michelle Dupree, death by insulin. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I use insulin constantly, 24/7, 365. I'm always on insulin, and my doctor's always warning me about those low blood sugars, how dangerous they can be. What are your thoughts about death by insulin?
Well, it does seem reasonable, given all the information that I've heard and the testimony from the forensic pathologist, and the level of his glucose at that time. That is unexplainable. Unless he had something like a tumor, an insulinoma in the pancreas, which could also produce a lot of excess insulin, which would be found at autopsy. And so I assume that he did not have that because it was not mentioned. So the only other really logical explanation would be that he received insulin, either from himself or from someone else.
Let me ask you, Kelly Craft, this is an important question. There was a time before I had my insulin pump where I had to inject the insulin with a syringe. Didn't feel good. Did not feel good. How are prosecutors explaining that she got the insulin into Michael? Like, how does she stick him with a needle and he doesn't know?
They're not really explaining it. That's exactly what defense counsel is picking up on. And during cross-examination of one of the witnesses, defense counsel was asking that. He was saying, what did she do? Wait for him to come across the corner out of the kitchen, and then she stabbed him, jabbed him with the syringe, and he just said, even the defense counsel said he would have said, honey, what are you doing here? We're high school sweethearts. What are you doing stabbing me with a syringe here? And even if he knew then, he would have some time before the effects of the insulin kicked in to say, okay, what happened here? I need to go to the hospital. What did you just do to me? So yes, they haven't exactly said how she would have done it. Now, there's been testimony that he was asleep on the couch. Could she have gone over to him when he was asleep on the couch and done it? No one really knows. But no, prosecutors have not made it clear as to how she would have done it. Defense counsel has been picking up on that.
I've been thinking about that since the beginning of this. Kelly Craft doing a great job in West Virginia. Dr. Michelle Dupree, always right on. Thank you so much. This case is not an easy one for prosecutors. There are some real loose ends dangling in the courtroom, but it's not impossible. In the end, it may very well come down to whether or not the jury likes or believes Natalie Cochran. And that's something that's pretty difficult to predict at this point. We've got to wait till she gets on the witness stand. The evidence is there in this case for prosecutors, but there are still some questions. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.